are. So if you want to just take a quick screenshot of this with your camera or your computer, then you have that as a reference. I'll be showing it at the end as well, but this just may help you as you look for things. So go ahead and grab that. So we're really excited, Liz and I, and when we were planning this session, we started off thinking about calling it the do's and don'ts of design. But you know, we're really trying to focus on the positive. So we changed that up and it's the do and do of design. So we're going to show you a lot of ideas and inspiration and things to help you, things to consider as you're creating your spreads for your 2021 book. So hi, Liz. I'm so excited to get to teach with you today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here with you. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. Well, before, and I said we're going to talk about the do's and do's, we have one don't. So let me tell you a story. When I was in middle school, before I did yearbook, I decided to try to take art. And I loved my art teacher. She was great. But we had this one assignment and we were painting birds of the Audubon for a charity. And so as I was painting mine, she would walk around and tell me that this is how you paint the feathers. And she would actually take the brush from me and paint the feathers on the flamingo. Well, it was all nice and everything. Let me show you. So it went to the art show. The next day I came to school and she's like, your painting sold. And I was like, oh, great. That I didn't really paint it. So I went home, and you guys know how this story is going to go. My mom bought it. So still today, after all these years, I have this flamingo hanging in my office to remind me not to paint other people's flamingos and to kind of let them be who they are. So when I was an advisor, I had this, we told them the same story. And so when people were kind of getting in each other's work or trying to change something, they just sort of nicely said, hey, don't paint my flamingo. And it became a joke for us. But I think it's a really important lesson that as you guys are working with other people and helping them do better work, there's a difference between helping them and doing for them. And I know, you know, Liz and I have talked about this a lot when we were advisors. I got to work with her kids sometimes and she got to work with mine. So we really want to take that lesson as you're working on design and writing and anything else. But I think it happens the most with design that we sort of take over from people sometimes.
Yeah, I think because it's visual, we tend to want to communicate visually. So that's where we always have to, like, I had to remind myself, take your hand off the mouse.
Exactly. Or, you know, if I'm teaching, sometimes I do edit, undo after I showed someone how to do something. So just some little tips. Yeah. And they're like, why? Yeah.
Wait, you just did it. Yeah, but now you have to.
And, you know, it's usually 10 times better than the way that I've done it. And, you know, I want to empower you guys to do great work and help other people on your staff do that. I think there's nothing worse for somebody when that yearbook comes out and they're so excited that they worked on page 42 and 43 and they open it up to that page and it's not what they turned in. So we just kind of need to remember that, this teamwork and helping everybody do their best work. So that's our little leadership moment. I'm sure Ian's going to have a lot to add this afternoon. So let's get right into our do's and don'ts. So our first one is do utilize white space. Liz, why don't you jump in?
White space is one of my favorite things, and it doesn't matter whether you fill it with black and it's black space or you fill it with purple and it's purple space. It's just space that's not really busy with anything else. The thing that I really love about utilizing space is that, and it's probably because somebody told me this, if you think about some of the ritziest, nicest, most expensive stores, when you go into them, they're like boutiques. Everything has its own space and there's lots of space in the boutique and it feels very open and airy and very nice. And if you go into a discount store, then everything is all kind of squished together. So it was just kind of an idea of, I like that feeling of openness. So if we take a look at this first piece, you're going to see that we've got some margins around the outside, a lovely frame. And then on the inside, we also have some alleyways, some space between the modules, in and among the modules, which allows each one of those to communicate on its own. You'll also notice that the way that this design is laid out, we start in that upper left-hand corner with It's a Process. It takes us across to the top, down to the bottom left to that caption that's anchoring the information for those photographs that are gathered, and then over to the right. So we're moving in a Z formation, which is not only a Z formation from when I was growing up in the 80s, but also something that our eyes naturally do because that's the way that we read. So all of those little paying attention to the details, those things are really important. Not only do we have that space, but you'll notice that in and among that photo collection and each of the photo collections, we have tighter spacing. And that tighter spacing says, hey, this all works together. This is all telling part of the same story. And that's what I really love about that. And you can see that same pattern repeated here. This is two spreads coming from the same book. You can see that same pattern. Now, we don't have to redraw in the white space and the margin for you to be able to see the margin around the outside and then the white space that is separating each of the modules. But that allows the reader to travel around the spread and understand what goes with what, and makes it very easy for them to either take little tiny bites with captions or with the y'all perform in the upper left hand corner, or take bigger bites by actually entering that story space, which looks beautiful too. Something else I'd like to point out about that story space, notice that they've got lovely tabs in there, and those are put into not only indicate paragraphs, but also notice that many of the paragraphs are short. That's not intimidating. So even thinking about how you're going to use your space in your story writing is going to help put everything together for your readers on the other end. We can see here in Santiago High School, easy for me to say, that they're also following that same Z formation, but they're starting with the story in the upper left. They've still got the framing around the edges. They carry us over to the right, and they have that lovely amount of spacing in the right-hand side, separating that track time piece, that little feature, and then the running stats piece, and each one of those other little pieces, tiny bits of information that are being shared with the reader so that they are small and really digestible. How do you eat a buffalo? Not all in one bite. You take small bites. This allows your reader to take those small bites and still to see the entire story of the track team here. In this piece from Providence High School out in North Carolina, we see that they've got a lovely white frame around what they've got on the spread. And because they have that frame, it allows us to immediately choose whether we want to go up into that favorite moments portion, whether we want to enter that new to the game portion and read the story, whether we want to look over at those captions, or take a look at that first year on varsity piece. And notice how each piece has its own particular space on the layout. That allows everybody to decide where they want to go, and it allows them to travel back and forth across the spread comfortably. We want our readers to feel comfortable, and by allowing them to rest in between the modules, we're actually helping them to feel more comfortable, which makes them happier. Oh, I love this. This treatment does such a great thing with space. Not only do we see the filling of the space on the right-hand side, but we see the balance of that. And sometimes people get confused and they think, oh, well, everything has to weigh the same. No, actually, on the right-hand side, we have a very large and heavy dominant image. So on the left-hand side, the beautiful use of space at the top and on the right side of that module, or of the story space, and then over in the module on the far left, all of that space helps balance this out. So again, we're talking about giving our reader the opportunity to relax just a little bit and appreciate this piece from Stillwater Area High School. I love what East Bakersfield did here. The fact that they have so much going on in such vivid colors, it really is super exciting to look at, but they've been thoughtful. Rather than intimidating the reader with having all of this put right next to each other, they've thought about how they want to put these units on the spread. And they've actually taken and adapted to make their own one of the templates that was already created. They took a look at it and said, okay, so we want to add a little space here. We want to put in some special touches there. And they made this their own. Look at even what they did with the spacing on that headline, all that jazz. It's a little jazzy because they've actually thought about how they wanted to space the words, all that and jazz. So it sort of moves us back and forth. It gives us that little jazz hands appeal there, which is really kind of fun. They've also, taken us up and down and side to side on that layout, so we can easily travel in that Z formation, and we can make choices about where we want to be. And each piece is clearly its own piece.
So with that, kind of how Liz discussed the Z formation, that also helps us create a hierarchy. So our next do is do create a hierarchy. So what we've talked about with hierarchy, what we want to think about is dominance, center of visual interest, size, movement, and modular design. So here from Fenton High School, they have a very clear hierarchy. This very nice photo on the left, and which is the old throwback from 50 years, and then the current one. So when you open that spread, your eyes go right there. It's an introduction to the spread, and then you sort of move around and look at the other pieces and the stories that are being told there. Another example of hierarchy with this really beautiful, vibrant, dominant photo, again, pulls your eyes right into it, and then notice where she's looking. She's looking at the text, and then you move around the spread almost in a circular pattern. So this is my joy, and then the bottom. So as you start designing, your job as a designer is to tell readers what you want them to see first, what you want them to see next, and so on. Again, strong hierarchy, and then notice the scale and the difference between the dominant photo and the other ones. The dominant photo is 2 to 3 times larger here than any other photo on the spread. The other thing that you may notice in terms of hierarchy is that the headline, the dominant headline with the dominant photo, is the largest headline on the spread. Then you've got the smaller ones with the smaller packages. So again, you're telling the reader, hey, look here first, then look at this, then look at this. I just love what Center Grove did. It goes beyond just the hierarchy, what we've talked about. And then you can see the strong margins, the internal spacing that Liz referenced, the packages get smaller, the headlines get smaller. And then over on the left, there's something really intriguing. Their theme was, we really did that. So throughout the book, they've taken this space and created a whole book link that's running through. They ask people, what are the things that you really did? And so you've got, several people, I think 15 in each little block, that are answering questions that change throughout the book. And that is amazing coverage. And, in terms of hierarchy, who's the first person that you look for when you get the book? It's yourself. So when you get more people in the book, you have a better chance to see yourself. And then we flow and look at everything else and every other story that's being told. Really, really fun photo from Kirkwood High School and spread. I almost feel like I'm at that event. The photos are clear. It pulls you right into the spread, and you've got new kids on the block because it's freshman camp, and then stuff with their mascot. So many stories that are intriguing, and they're leading you into, even on the smaller modules, there's a dominant element with each one of those. When you think about modular design, it's almost like a spread within a spread. So think about what you want people to see first in that module, just like you would on a spread. This pulled me right into the people in the canoe, and then on the word relax behind it. I almost, everything else just fell to the back. This pulls you in, it takes you to that moment. You really don't usually see photos this big, this going, horizontal, going across a spread like this, but it really worked well for them at Southwest Career and Technical Ed. Everything else became secondary, and there is a huge hierarchy of very much weight here, that weight difference. And those are some of the things that good designers do, because what are you trying to tell? What's the story here? And this is about the travelers that adventure out into the spring air, like the secondary headline says. So I get that feeling. I understand the story right away. If we go to the Geneva School in Texas, and it's a K through 12 school, so it's always fun when you have cute little kids to bring in. Now, they did this really strong, nice cutout background of the student doing the science experiment. And then the numbers and the artwork, they created that on their own. So they had somebody that was an expert illustration. They created that, brought it in. And I think it's also interesting that you've got, even though the kid on the left is working on his experiment, the one below is almost thinking, because of the way that those numbers look like quote bubbles, it's almost like he's thinking about that experiment as well. So we've got little Einsteins, that's the collective headline for the spread, and then smaller pieces within that spread. Again, going back to Nevada, and again, strong hierarchy. And then look at, when I was talking about each module, if we look down at the bottom, almost left near the gutter, so we have in real time. And within that, there are photos that are larger than the others. Some of those pictures have one person, some of them have them two, a couple of them have a little more than that. There's a lot of variety within the spread. And that's what you're really thinking about as you design. Do all of these things look the same? One time I heard that symmetry was the devil of design. I don't think that's true now, but it starts to, you have to make your reader decide which way to go. Here, you as the designer are controlling what they see.
And we're going to take a look at color now, one of my favorite design tools. And there are some different approaches that you can take to using color in your book. Some schools prefer to have a very specific color palette. Some choose to use colors as a reader service and actually have different sectional colors so that you know where you are based on the color of the folio. Some choose to pull the color from the dominant image, and then we always want to see a three-peat of color, and that is something that allows our brains to actually process that color and appreciate its use, and it makes us feel like there's much more unity to the spread itself. I just love the effect here. The choice of using blue and then having the dominant image have blue in the background and this bright, bright red really creates a lovely contrast. It was a very thoughtful choice as they pulled the color. Now this is a pulled color. You can very definitely see that just behind her is that same blue that we see repeated at least 3 times in the headline, the drop capital letter in the story, in the behind the scenes piece, in the folio itself, and in the background of the image of the student speaking there, and then over on the cast list. And I like what they did here, that they included every single person in the cast in that cast list, because it does take the entire group of people to make the magic. I'm sure that they, like many other schools, when they're finished with their performance, not only do they take their bows as actors, but they probably give a hand to the people behind the scenes. So that whole cast list really does highlight what they've done there. That's a nice treatment, and using that color to accent it is a good idea as well. Something you may not be able to see if you're on a tiny screen is that they also used that same accent color for all the student names within the copy, allowing students to find themselves immediately, which is very exciting. And you can see that same treatment. It's the reason that we're showing multiple spreads from same school. We want you to see what it looks like from one place to another when you're using pulled color. So here they're using 2 different tones of green pulled from the clear background on that dominant image. And that they are using that green to guide us around the spread again. So not only do we see it in the images of the action, but we also see it in the headline, and in that dropped capital letter, the names again, and in that folio down at the bottom. I just really love the way that folio looks. The fact that they, cut out the backgrounds and then dropped that color in the background really does add just a little bit of that extra, you're being so extra. I love the extra. And then finally over on the left, there was just that one other use of that. Sorry, Jeff. Of course, I have to be a little extra, right? Isn't that the rule? So that little sidebar on the left-hand side uses that same repetition of color. So very thoughtful in the use of color to guide the reader around that spread. Thanks. Here from Providence High School in North Carolina, we have an echo of color. We again are pulling the color from that dominant image. In the shirt, they pull that beautiful blue, and then they use it to guide you around the piece, not only in the headline and the names of the sidebars, but also in the drop capital letter that drops you into the copy itself. So all of those little bits and pieces coming together to unify that spread. I do want to point out, we're going to see some other spreads from Providence later. Take a look at that bottom right. If you're looking at that folio, you'll see that's a different color. Okay, and the reason that that's a different color, remember how I mentioned some schools use like a sectional color palette? They've chosen to highlight each of their sections with a particular color in that folio so that you know where you are. So this is the balance section, and it has that beautiful blue. So everywhere in the balance section, you're going to see that same beautiful blue. Oh, Reno High School. Oh, shout out to Reno if you're there. This is my former school where I lived in Reno and taught there for 17 years. It was a great school. Very much a school-spirited type of school. And as you can see, there's a lot of red and blue in their uniforms. That's their color scheme in the book as well. They often do a school pride color scheme. And using that that same color scheme of blue and red makes it really easy to match the uniforms, the spirit shirts, kind of everything that's going on. If you have a highly spirited school and that is your culture, you know, we wear a lot of school colors and that is what we do. It certainly is important for you to think about using those school colors in the places where they make the most sense. But I like how they've used it here, not only in the larger bars telling us where we need to go, but also even in the drop cap, they've got the outline and then that red that drops us in. But holding together that shout out panel with the little red bracket there, that broken box. Really a nice way of using color to guide your reader. And we can see how that looks on a different spread. So as you are making those transitions, you make different choices. They chose to do blue in the headline and then red in the drop cap on the previous one. Now we have red in the headline and blue in the drop cap in that story package. And then over to the right, we're using that complementary blue to draw in our attention. And so we see the got your back piece, and it's very clearly all together as one package, again, using that spacing. And then the color also helps us travel around the page. Oh, this book is so beautiful. And this image doesn't even do it justice. It's even more beautiful in person when you get to see it. A great textured cover. And this started off much differently, but the more that they thought about it, the more they decided that they wanted this kind of a color palette and this approach, because they really wanted it to have this vibe of kind of casual and fun, but at the same time spirited. And so those bright colors of the yellow, orange, and red that contrast with that beautiful blue turquoise that they chose, that creates that sort of vivid feeling that they were hoping for the Rogers vibe. And that's pretty darn cool. You see it inside the pages, and I just love what they've done with it. Not only have they used that bright red over on the left in the Can You Dig It sidebar. For those of you who saw it before, you remember that this is something that carries through the entire book. This is all the way through as a theme element. But they've also used the bars of that contrasting turquoise blue and the yellow to really make those cutout background images of their students stand out. Let's address the picture and the headline here, Sweet But a Psycho. Love the color balance here first, but secondly, just to explain, no, she's not going to shoot someone in the classroom. This is an AP psych class, and they're learning how the brain processes information from the eyes. So those goggles are actually messing with their vision and showing them how everything is not quite what you think you see. So very interesting experiment. And this piece, all on different labs, not only guides our attention first with the color, the bright use of the Psycho headline with the blue behind it, but also then the Who, What, When, Where, Why story package has that color again, taking our attention right there. Then they guide us through the spread and we see Rockin' It, smaller size, again, the vivid use of color, and then over to the right with the other piece on labs, and again with the red and the blue as contrasts. I love what they did with those little colored quote boxes, pulling out more quotes and including more students. And then one more level. They take that new year, new me, tiny sidebar there, and they even use their signature colors in the artwork that they created to put that on the spread. So students spent their time really refining each of these things. They started early, they kept working, and they were very thoughtful as they used that color palette throughout the book. Notice even it's in the folios, and you can see it here in that folio as well. So down in the folio, we have that standout color with students and folio or spread information. But we also see it here in the Catch My Thrift. Okay, so we're starting to see, if you take a really close look at the word thrift, you'll see that it's orange with the yellow behind it, sort of a drop shadow effect, which is really visually interesting. That bar is simply a transparency of the color, that turquoise. And then notice how in each of their featured bits, the athletic, trendy, country, and skater styles that those students have identified as their signature style, we're using contrasting colors. So yellow goes with the red goes with the turquoise goes with the orange, and then the orange goes with the yellow. Very bright, very happy, very fun to look at. The entire book just catches your attention as you go. And it's that use of color blocking that really is a nice way to treat their design. Oh, this is back to the Geneva School. And as we had mentioned before, this is a K-12 school. And you'll see here again, student created artwork in that blast off piece using the same color scheme, just as Rogers did. Geneva School did too. They actually were thoughtful about the color scheme. But where did those colors come from? Oh yeah, it's right there, that dominant image. We see the red bandanas and the blue bandanas, and that's where they pulled those colors. And then we see that contrasting color use over on the right-hand side in that bar that shows up throughout the book with the culture corner, talking about the culture of their school. You can see it again here, and you can notice that that big vibrant wheel with all those colors, that's actually where they pulled the yellow and the green that they're using there. And so we can see how that ties together.
Sorry, I was going a little fast for you.
That's okay, I'll speed up.
The next thing that is one of our do's is do think of text as a design element. I think it's really important because it's so visual and you can maximize your font. Sometimes people think when I say, you know, maybe 2 or 3 fonts at the most, maybe 1 font, they're like, you're taking away our creativity. But really, what I'm doing is challenging you to do more with that font. And that's where it becomes a lot more interesting. We also need to think about creating visual verbal connections between the headlines and the photos. What are your captions going to be? What kind of stories and alternative formats? And again, this one's really, really important, that readability. So at Fenton High School in Michigan, they chose 1 font, and then look how they've used it in a few different ways. You have a thin weight, you have a thick weight, then also lower and uppercase mixed in there as well. The captions are easy to read, all the student information. On their page numbers in the folio, the 001, here they're using that thick version of that font. Here again, they've had a lot of fun and really thought through this. The headline could have just been give back because that's what they're doing, they're volunteering, but instead they play out with that I, make it really personal, so now it becomes I give back. And so now this becomes a personal story about that student in the photo and then the other kids that were volunteering so that they could give back. Really interesting. Over on the right side behind the green bar, they've taken their theme logo that was introduced on the cover. We saw it on the title page, the how we see it, and now that's a personal quote. So what they've done here is they have the collective of how we see it, but that's created by having all of these little pieces, these little individual pieces that add up to how they see it. Saw this a little bit yesterday. Another treatment with the headline, the thin and thick move together. And as you go around, how do you see it? So there's an emphasis on the word you with that black text. Still from the same book, but here's what I'm talking about. When you've got 1 font, what can you do with it? And so here they've done something else. They kind of have the shadow behind the way, and that red is pulled from the dominant photo. So it's really interesting that each of these categories that we're talking about, as we go through and look at these spreads, you start to see how they're putting all of the pieces together. This is pretty amazing. You've got this action, this active. Our volleyball player she's being woven in between right. That eye is popping up. Now again, look at the use of the text with the mixing of the the lowercase and the uppercase. And they've created it so it's the same size, but there's a little bit of mix that creates some energy. And then you have the dominant photo. Maybe that's what you saw first. And she's pointing right at you. It's taking you right to this moment. This is the most important moment, what's going on right now, right here in our school. Over in the opening copy, they've called out some of the words. And so you've got the early, pathway, chance, laboratory. So some of those are just pulled out. That keeps it visually interesting. Notice that copy block is not super long. They're able to start telling their story, simplified, pulling out some of those words that pulls in the reader. Now I want to look down below that, and they have their caption. Now the caption's right on the photo. So they put a little bit of a transparent box on it so it's readable. And that's what I think that a lot of yearbooks are kind of missing, is making sure that those captions are readable when they put them on photos. I try to discourage that, but I know you guys are going to do it. So let's make sure it's readable, make that opacity less if you've got to do that. Because what's the point of writing your caption, spending all that time on it, if it's not readable and if it takes away from the photo? So just think about those images and make every word count. Same book. Look again at that woven. He's literally hanging on from that letter. So just really cool as we go around and look at what they've done with the font. So 5 things to know. I think it's really neat how some of them are numerals and some of them are spelled out numbers. So again, it creates some fun there. Down the bottom right, no trail left behind. So it's creating a trail around that photo. Again, this is a school that did not use 16 fonts. They've got 2 fonts in this entire book, I believe.
And speaking of the use of color and text, we also want to think about graphic enhancements, ways that we can use graphics to direct our reader. Everything that's on a spread should be communicating with the reader, saying, hey, look at this. Oh, what about that? So let's make sure that we're not overwhelming them or underwhelming them by using appropriate shapes and textures to get them to interact and to engage with each of our spread designs. So first we'll look at something we might want not to do. We debated about whether we should show you this one or the next one first, but we're going to show you this one first. Notice how that background really detracted from what was going on the spread. It made it difficult to read. It was too busy. There was too much going on. And we really just lost the spread with a background. Even though it was behind it, it felt like it was in front of it. So as we move on to the next one, you'll see so much cleaner, so much clearer, simply by using Restraint. I've heard the advice that as you're getting ready, put on all the things that you want to have on as far as jewelry and accessories. Take a look in the mirror and then take away one of those accessories. So maybe you were going to wear 5 rings, wear 4 instead. Same thing with design. Take a look at what you can do better by taking it back a little bit, stepping back a little bit. Notice also that background is really busy because of that Memphis design. So the busier the background, the more it takes away of the attention from the actual spread. You spend all of this time and effort and other people's time to gather all this information. Let's find a way to showcase it in the best possible way. Take a look also in this piece from Trinity, and we see that we've got that signature color of red, and they're using the graphic of lines as well as this sort of angled box. So sort of like almost a pennant or a banner coming down to draw your attention over there to that one pulled quote, but then also using that same treatment of the red with the black outline in the headline. Over on the left and the right with those red bars that are basically taking you back down to the material at the bottom. The kick has that red line as well as the JV feature. And then they're using it to halfway frame in the upper right-hand corner. So a lot of thought about using that line and line related design elements And then one more thing I want to point out here, notice the red outline on that football player, just giving another element of layering. So now we have the box, we have the red outline, and then we have the player in that kick piece, and that's a nice way to treat that. Here we see the use of that signature color again. We saw some of these before from Carol. Take a look at how they're cutting into that picture with basically a white box. So that again is a graphic treatment as well. The combination of fonts in the upper right-hand corner with the "We're all in." We see that repeated as well. Down in the headline for Outdoor Club is our thing and the signature. We see that element of handwriting repeated though, and that's the thing that's so cool. This graphic element of the handwriting shows up in that oval with the extra circle around the young lady in the Ohio State shirt. And then in the bottom left corner, and this is so cute and clever, the little arrow that points from the person's head down to the thing that they said when they were asked a question. Over on the right of the folio, they also are giving you just a little bit of additional information to tell you which week it is in that font. So that idea of kind of we're adding a little bit extra by adding in that handwriting font and then those hand-drawn looking graphics really adds a lot to that spread. And they repeated that. Love that they repeated it in the people pages. In these student photo pages, they can get a little bit repetitive if you don't start thinking about what else can we do to add in more people, love the coverage, but also add in more visual interest. So here they used this great orange and red, or like an orange and a darker orange combo. They use it in the music that moves you piece. They add that color in. So we have that kind of handwritten movement element to it. It's a layering feel in that piece. But let's take a look at the young lady. There was even a little bit of thought here. I love not only is she wearing an orange shirt, it looks like that's where that color came from, but that her head is tilted. So when you think about graphic, think about what you're looking at and what that's doing, because that little head tilt, and to me it reminds me of like Ariana Grande, just kind of it's a little attitude, and it's so great that that arrow then carries right down to that quote. So go ahead and have people have a little fun when you're doing these type of thematic images as well. Love this. I know you've seen another one. This is so wonderful, and this graphic was all created in Photoshop by Ethan, and he is one of the students at John Paul Stevens. They actually do this, they do their yearbook class like online all the time, so they do their own work and then they gather back together to put it all together. So this was all created with this fall color scheme, and this is a lot of information. So we have to think, how can we break up all of this information and make it bearable for our reader? Well, the thought of using the graphic images and then separating them with those white lines and using a little bit of white within each of the infographics allows the reader that eye rest and direction. We understand that each of these units is its own piece of information. I do have to say my favorite graphic is in the upper right-hand corner. I don't know how many of you were checking out the person sleeping, but yes. That's one of my favorite parts of any break, is the sleeping part. And here we talked about guiding the reader through. We've got a lot of activity in that teacher panel on the left, because teachers had the option of posing with some sort of prop. And I love that they did that, because we get a lot more personality from them. I'm not sure if the teacher that's like, let's see, 1, 2, 3 rows down and 2 in holding the skull, if that is a theater teacher or an anatomy teacher. It's either a Shakespeare reference or it's just, hey, this is, you know, this is what we do. And I do have to do a little shout out there on the bottom left when we're thinking about graphics. The bottom left is actually the yearbook advisor there. So shout out to Shannon Wolf carrying the yearbook cover right there. Very excited to see that. So when we think graphically, we think in terms of what we're communicating. And over to the right, we've got to balance out that real busy panel with a little bit more space. So they do that Bitmoji mix and match, and they actually are using white space around it to create kind of a moment for the reader before they move into the third graphic element, which is the rectangular, using the blue line and the blue rectangle, as well as those white lines to guide the reader through that piece. There's a lot going on here, but it's all so much fun. And here's Providence. Remember, I told you you'd be seeing this again. Let's start with the bottom right-hand corner at that folio, and we'll see that that is now green because this is the connect section. So it's a different signature color for that section. So that's how they decided to use that, was simply as a reader service piece. Up above, obviously, pulled color from that pink, and they're holding those pink smoking cans. So you spin my cans right round. And then they use that same pink in the secondary headline as well. One of the cool things about this is they used some restraint here in this cool brushstroke treatment. If they had brushstroked each and every photograph, or if they had done it all the way around the edges, it would have less of an effect. But by using restraint, by taking it back a step, they were able to create something really beautiful. And I'm sure that those of you who are thinking three-peat are noticing that not only is it in the two headlines, but also in the names and then in that drop cap. Another spread from Providence to show you how, again, they were thinking about what they wanted to do and using restraint. We have this background, and we have that little brush stroke, just very slight on the right-hand side in that first time ever piece. But we also see the repetition of the color on the left-hand side. So all of those elements coming together to create nice packaging in that panel section. Notice also that folio, because we're in the panels of people section, we have that folio in that golden yellow. Keep in mind, if we're using a golden or a yellow, we need to make sure that it's readable. And I know that if you're on a small screen, you may not be able to read this, but in print, this is golden. You can see it.
I think this last category is one that really gets me excited about yearbooks. So we do want to surprise our audience, kind of know what's going to be in the yearbook. They know what to expect up until this year. So we're going to look at some things where some yearbooks have surprised their audiences with specialty spreads, showstoppers, rule breakers, and great photography. Beautiful specialty spread. They're covering the town. This is my hometown, Austin. So it's gorgeous what they've done with the skyline. And then they're featuring where kids go, where you find them outside of school, how they interact with their community. And so some of you guys have some really interesting things going on in your community. Have you ever thought about covering that in the yearbook? I think that could make this year really special. So in 2020, you guys have all been there. You didn't go back to school, and now we have this major event happening in the world, and we've got to finish the book as well. So kind of two things come together, and out of necessity, but also because they wanted to tell that story, Castleview put together this beautiful Corona spread with no people in it except for one on the bottom right, because it's sort of what we felt like. And if you remember back when this first happened and the shelves were empty and people were fighting for toilet paper and all, kind of moved on from that. But when you look at this spread, even just a few months ago, which seems like a lifetime ago, it takes you right back to that moment. So you guys think about when 25 years from now, you're looking back at this book and you see these things and the stories that you could tell. And that's really what your book does. It takes you back to a memory or a certain point in time. Here they've covered the sports outside of school. So you have kids that maybe don't play football and the inside sports, but they really made an effort to find out ones that were doing non-school sports, some surprises there with the martial arts and the biker. So really going beyond the expected. Kind of the same idea. It's not a traditional spread, what we would expect with a dominant photo that's larger, but really the guy playing the baritone sort of becomes the dominant, and then you've got some movement at the top of the spread as well. I really love what Astronaut did here, kind of to feature their sports and their athletes. they really created this picture by laying out the different equipment and things that you need for different sports, and then overlaid those with the black and white photos and a quote from an athlete from that sport. I think the black and white here was really important because it helps them stand out from the background. And so that made just a little bit of an extra difference. So as you're planning and designing, think about some of those things. And you know what you guys have the advantage that we didn't have was you can try it both ways and then see which one works better for you. So much fun. Southwest Career and Technical Academy, they found a way, and they always find a way to reach out to all different kinds of students. So here we've got this whole pixel perfect spread, and you've got kids in your school that maybe they're not spending lots of time at school, but what are they doing at home? What are their passions? And I see that Southwest Career and Technical Academy was really paying attention to that and making people feel like they're part of the book, that they're important. Great photography. Margaret talked about that this morning, Margaret and Casey. That's so important. When we open this spread, that's really the surprise. I go right to that photo, and then everything else is secondary. You know, we could have a book without a theme or writing. Hopefully we wouldn't, but we could. We cannot have a book without photos. So if there's one thing that you want to improve, I think you should take a serious look at your photos and how you can make them better. And finally, just another great moment. Judson did a nice job, and they pulled in students that we don't often see in your books. So there's a diversity here, and it's really focusing on that photo. I think Margaret this morning said, when you have a beautiful photo, don't be afraid to use it as the spread, and this became their divider. Also notice what they did with the text. They put the white box behind it, so it's really readable. So this all kind of comes together. All right, so we've got, oh wow, we only went 1 minute over. So that's a surprise for us, right, Liz?
Hey, especially because I talk so much.
It's all good. In your workbook on pages 6 and 7, here's some of the anatomy of design and some little step-by-steps that can help you, especially if you're brand new, but I think all of us can use a reminder, or if you are experienced, this can help you teach the newbies. So some little pieces here in the workbook, and they reiterate some of the things that we talked about earlier today. So with your staff today, in your staff meeting later this afternoon, you want to work together to determine your design strategies. But before that, don't go anywhere because we have the breakouts and then Ian. Here's our email address. If you want to email Liz or I, we'll be happy to answer your questions. And here's Ian.
Hey, thanks so much, Liz and Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
To be back with everybody this afternoon, hoping I get spotlighted on here in just a second. I know it usually takes a minute, and that's okay. While we're just waiting for that, I wanted to just say really quickly from a note that was received about this morning's. Just to clarify, I'm certainly not going after, blind optimism and ignoring everything that's going on with COVID and everything else. We're doing little nuggets here. In the longer presentation, I dive deep into what we do in the times of the negative. And I would maybe refer to something in one of my presentations that's kind of my life motto, which is pain is inevitable. Misery is a choice. Bad stuff's going to happen. It's what we choose to do with it. So I'm still seeing Jeff's screen. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be, or am I up on anybody else's?
Nope, I see you on mine. Do I need?
Okay, perfect. It must just be my view. That's totally fine. Excellent. Hopefully I'm on the whole thing spotlighted for everyone. Oh, there we are. Excellent. So, friends, I have no memory of my mom's cooking. My mom passed when I was 10 years old. She had a brain tumor. She couldn't use her right arm or her left leg. She was in a wheelchair for about 7 years before she passed. In and out of hospitals. They didn't know what was wrong with her for a very long time. So I grew up in a single parent home. A lot of people do. Gratitude was often hard to come by in our family. My dad was an independent business person. He was an entrepreneur. He ran his own business, which meant long days at work and sometimes longer nights in the home office. He busted his butt to put food on the table for my brother and sister and I. But the funny thing is that he often wasn't the person putting the food on the table. See, my brother and sister and I were latchkey kids. We would come home from school every day. Literally, my older brother would have a little key around his neck and open up the door. When we'd come home, there'd be a note from my dad of our chores, the things we had to do before dad came home in order to make sure that food got on the table. Now, my older brother, he was usually in charge of some kind of meat. My younger sister, because she was younger, canned vegetables, frozen vegetables, something easy. Me, I was the carbs. I am still the carbs. It's kind of become my life's work. But more often than not, it was one particular kind of carbs. Instant mashed potatoes. Not sure if you've ever had the pleasure of instant mashed potatoes, but dehydrated potatoes that look like they've been put through a pencil sharpener, a little milk, a little water, a little butter, a little salt. Not necessarily the best thing on the menu, but I have to tell you, I loved them back then. And I loved them because it was my job. And I took such pride in that job. I did it so often, I didn't even have to read the box anymore. I could just eyeball that thing. It became part of my identity. I remember us going to therapy as a family as we were going through that time and trying to heal. Very first session, therapist went around the room and said to each of us, tell me your name and what you feel your role is in the household. And when it came to me, I said, I'm Ian. I'm the mashed potatoes. I relished that job. And yeah, my brother and sister and I, as siblings will do, we fought and yelled at each other all the time when we were in the kitchen. But when dad came home and the food went on the table, well, we may not have been a family that said grace all the time, but we damn well gave thanks. We gave thanks for the food on the table. We gave thanks for the Father who was getting us through. Thanks for each other. And that sense of gratitude that we gave brought it right back. We gave it, we got it, we wanted more. It became the fuel for the engine of our healing. That's why to this day, I don't say I'm grateful. I say I have great fuel. That's what #great fuel is, something I put out all the time, because gratitude became the fuel for me and for my brother and for my sister. And it's no wonder that my brother and sister and I all grew up loving to cook. That chore became a passion. And we still fight like siblings do, except now, more often than not, we will fight about who's bringing what to the family functions. And sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm all on the screen. Now people want my potato recipe. Thank you, Melissa. But for who's bringing what to the family function. But as happens at Christmas and at Thanksgiving and stuff every single year, I will inevitably get an email that says, hey, Ian, you want to bring mashed potatoes? Yeah, you're damn right I do. Except I got to tell you, the game has changed as I've grown. Now we're talking russet potatoes cooked with the skins on, cut up, boiled in milk, butter, extra old white cheddar, roasted garlic, kosher salt, fresh ground black pepper, just delicious. It's awesome. And and I love it so much. But it's funny when I think back to that time and all of us cooking those meals, what I think about the most is my dad and how he must have felt. Do you remember being a kid and maybe it's Christmas or Mother's Day or Father's Day or a birthday or something like that? You didn't have any money to buy them a present. So what did you do? You made them something. Maybe at school, often a piece of crap, but when you came home, you'd say, I made this for you. All of your love, all of yourself put into it. And I can tell you, as a person who has two kids that are now grown up and in their 20s, when they were young and they'd come home and say, Dad, I made this for you. Ooh, got me right in the feels. And we got to say, I made this for you every single day to my dad. But what that also makes me think about is, why do we, as individuals, not do things every single day that allow us to look ourselves in the mirror and say, I made this for you? Now, I'm not saying that I stand in my bathroom in front of the mirror with a plate full of food that I cook. Maybe twice, okay, 3 times. But that's one of the reasons I love to cook, because I make it for me. It's how I relax. It's how I meditate. It's my quiet time, and I love it. And look, I love to cook. I love to have people sitting around my table more than anything in the world. And, you know, I can't wait for the time when I can have people back at my table. But when oftentimes, you know, because I live alone, I'll be cooking and, you know, I'll post that on Instagram. I'm not ashamed. I love posting pictures of my food, and I'll put that stuff up there. And occasionally I'll get a text from a friend of mine and say, hey, what are you, do you have people over? What's the deal? And I'd say, nothing. It's just me. They say, why did you plate it like that with all the fancy things? Because I'm worth it. And so are you. I want you to find that thing that's going to give you your great fuel that you make for you. It's that self-care, the thing that you do to take care of yourself. I also want you to realize that when you're putting your books out, that is an act of caring. It's not expecting the gratitude back. It's giving the gratitude when you say, I made this for you, to the people at your school. It's a gift you're giving them. And then you'll create that fuel that's going to, that great fuel that's going to just fuel that engine on and on and on. Find the things that are going to fill you up that way. And friends, one last thing. I made this for you. Thank you so much. We'll see you in about an hour and a half. Again, you can reach me at Ian Tyson on Instagram and Twitter, and Ian Tyson Speaker on Ian Tyson Speaker Facebook, and iantyson.ca is my website. Thanks so much.
Hi, y'all. Just a reminder, we're headed out to the breakouts, the experienced versus the people that need some freshening up or learn something completely new. We are running a few minutes behind. Our next session after the breakouts is our 3:30 p.m. Marketing session. So log in using the previous login, and if you have any issues, email Tina, and I'll see y'all next in the next breakout. If you're in the experienced group, you stay here. If you're in the new advisor and new staff members, you leave this room and go to the other link. Thank y'all. We'll see you in a minute.